After working with over 200 podcasters, I've discovered a shocking truth. Many entrepreneurs and experts with podcasts are unknowingly sacrificing their sales conversions for the sake of podcast prestige. Now, whilst you're busy chasing high-profile guests, other shows out there with a simple solo podcast format are quietly converting their listeners into high-ticket clients. And the painful truth is that for most podcasters, this expert positioning that we're looking after, which leads you to chase high-profile guests, might be positioning you as the student rather than the expert your audience should buy from. So in this video, I'm going to uncover the uncomfortable data that we've gathered after working with business owners. And you'll discover whether or not you're building an audience of potential clients or simply borrowing an audience that will vanish as soon as your guest leaves. This really is a video that explores the challenges and some of the setbacks around interview-focused podcasts to give you clarity around whether or not to double down on interview-based shows or whether or not to explore a different format for your show. With that being said, let's dive straight in. Now getting into the pros and cons, strengths and challenges of interview-based podcasts. So one of the strengths is built-in content variety. You get a fresh perspective each episode. You reduce the content creation burden. It's you inviting and just chatting with someone else who they are the one who's providing the most amount of value. And of course, you have natural topic diversity. Each episode, you're getting someone else with a different perspective who can share those insights with your audience. So those are definitely some strengths when it comes to interview-based shows. Another one is network expansion. So kind of like the inverse of solo shows where you don't really get the network effect as much. When it comes to interview-based podcasts, a lot of my clients, when they have their interviews with industry leaders, it really helps them with their network and helps them with that brand building piece. And just honestly, it's more of a personal thing more than it is a business success thing, which I'll get into what I mean by that later on. But essentially, your personal network will grow and you'll have access to your guest audience if they do promote, which can help you out when it comes to increase in listenership. And of course, you have potential partnership opportunities as well. Because if you have a guest onto your podcast and there's alignment between what they do, that relationship can open up a door for so many more things in the future. So again, these are definitely benefits to interview shows. And then finally, enhanced credibility markers for my LinkedIn lovers and status chasers. Nothing wrong with it, not hating, I'm just saying. The point being, if you get high-profile guests onto your podcast, it's great, right? It's fantastic. It's great for your ego. It's great for social media. It looks fantastic for you and your brand because you're getting someone who is a well-known leader and an industry expert coming onto your podcast, sharing value with your audience. This is definitely a bonus and it adds massively to social proof as well. So those right there are the strengths. But what are some of the challenges? Here are the challenges, right? When it comes to interview-based shows, you really do have a diluted business impact. So if you are an entrepreneur and expert and the primary goal of your podcast is to drive business for your business, you'll find this challenging, very challenging with an interview-based show. Because you have much lower conversion rates because as you inviting the guests on, they provide the value. Remember the guy on stage at a conference giving the value, then a random host comes on, hey, by the way, guys, work with me. Can you see how that would feel disconnected? And then, of course, what does that lead to? Well, you tell me, right? It will lead to, again, less control over the key messages being shared on your podcast. Great for diverse opinions, but terrible for you sharing your core message and having that impact your listeners. It's much harder to integrate call to action because you've spent the last hour building up a guest and then you share your stuff, feel disconnected. Sharing a spotlight reduces your own authority because you're not the one giving the value to your audience, so that's kind of an L. You then, of course, have more difficulty demonstrating your own methodology. Now, don't get me wrong, you can do this in an interview-based show. It's just way harder. Like, just by nature of how things are set up, it's you trying to extract value from the guest. And then finally, it's you kind of positioning yourself as the student rather than the expert. And if you're trying to generate clients for your business, I think you could probably start to see where disconnect starts to happen when you need to be the expert that people want to learn from. And then, of course, you have the difficulties when it comes to production, right? Scheduling dependency on someone else and their timelines, which can be long sometimes. Technical coordination requirements. They might have a terrible mic, or they might have the right proper setup to create a high quality sounding podcast. Also, they might just suck as a guest. That does happen sometimes, which can feel like a total waste of time. just straight up, right? And then finally, less flexible when it comes to creating timely content. You can't just bell up a guest and be like, oh, by the way, this news just came up. Come here now. Let's do this interview. It's going to blow up my podcast. They'd be like, yeah, that's great, but like, I've got a schedule that's not going to work out for me for XYZ reasons. So definitely limitation when it comes to creating more timely content. And like I mentioned, timely content is such an underrated way of you tapping into and broadening your podcast audience. And like I mentioned earlier, like inconsistent episode quality. People don't think about this. If you're getting a guest on, they could be fantastic and they might be amazing, and you might have certain things in place to make sure you don't get crappy guests. There are going to be people who slip through the crack. Slip through the crack, that sounds quite funny, right? Slip through the crack. Anyways, I jest. The point is, you sometimes can find yourself in a spot where you don't create consistently high quality episodes because the guests you're having on aren't consistently high quality. One week they could be incredible, the next week maybe they're great, the next week they could suck, and then they're great again. So it's hard for you to build momentum and consistently deliver high quality content for your audience when the guests you have on, they might be an expert, but it doesn't mean they understand how to create great content for listeners to tune into. Those are two very separate things. A lot of experts out there, and a lot of them aren't great at creating content. They don't get that. Some do, some don't. And if you have an interview-based show, that's just something you have to kind of deal with. Whereas on the flip side, with a solo podcast, it's just you. So as long as you know your stuff, you have complete 100% control of the quality. Now, if you have to think about what that means for your podcast growth, your ability to position yourself as an expert, and just the entire experience, well, it means that if someone has a good experience with your podcast and they like your vibe, the next episode, they're going to like your vibe and they're going to keep listening. If they listen to a podcast with a guest that they love, but then the next guest they hate, which sometimes happens, they just don't vibe with them, well, guess what? They're not going to keep listening to the podcast. The other piece of this about this as well is if people are coming primarily for your guests, you're not really building your core fan base. You're just getting your guest fans to come onto your podcast, but it doesn't mean they're going to become your fan. It doesn't work like that, Whereas if it's a solo podcast and people are coming for you, the core audience really deeply resonate with your core message, and they're coming for you. So here's what it comes down to. Interview shows and solo formats both have their strengths and their weaknesses. And of course, they can serve two completely different purposes. One might help you expand your network, add social proof, help you with that status game that you might be chasing, while the other one might give you way more control over your messaging and the actual positioning of yourself as an authority. So the question really is, what is the primary goal of your podcast, and is your current format actually supporting that specific goal? If you aim to build authority, generate way more leads or sales, then it's probably worth evaluating whether or not your show is designed to build your brand or primarily focus on amplifying and showcasing others. And of course, you now actually have the trade-off, so you have a very clear idea of what the pros and the cons are, which means you're in a far better position to decide, does your current format once again align with your business strategies right now, or is it time to actually adjust the format and take a different approach? The decision is totally up to you, but it should be intentional. Now, for context, our clients have a hybrid approach where the majority of our clients are using their podcast in order to build their personal brand that attracts dream clients and monetization opportunities to their business. So they do have both interview and solo shows, but they tend to prioritize solo podcasts because that drives way more growth, way more revenue, and way more sales for themselves. So that's what our clients do, and that's what we prioritize with our podcast as well. Now look, with that being said, I'll catch you in the next video. And of course, if you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe.